Good morning. How's everybody doing? Happy Sunday to you. It's a fantastic day. Am I echoey to y'all? I am echoey, Bennett. Bennett's got me covered. You'll hear my voice change, and you just give him a thumbs up, not me, when you like the sound of my voice. All right, there we go. Man, it's great to be here with you guys. Happy Sunday. It's great. I love when we get a chance to get in here. This has been a really fun week here around this campus. For those of you who don't know, I know some of you do know, but for those of you who don't, we're not just a church, but we also have, as a part of this next generation, a lane that we are so passionate about. But we also have a preschool as one of our ministries, and we also have Cathedral Academy that goes all the way up to 12th grade. So this week is all about graduation week. We've got some seniors who have done the hard work. They've graduated. So, yeah, you can go ahead and give them a hand. Absolutely. And to that, I would say if there's any seniors in the house, whether you go to the Cathedral Academy or you go to another school around our amazing Low Country area, I just want you to know we are proud of you. You've done the hard work. You got 3 months off, but you're getting right back into the grind. So, but seriously, we're so proud of you guys. Great job. And here's what I want to tell you, and I'll leave this off with you, is this, is that you guys are entering into a season that God is getting ready to begin, if he hasn't already, begin just to really open up your eyes. Hey, listen, I have a plan for your life. I have a call for your life. Your gifts and talents are going to be coming alive more than they normally have been. It's just an incredible season that I feel like God has placed you in. We're excited for you. I want you to know we're praying for you. And know that this house is your home. And so you're also in a fun, challenging season. And so just know that if you ever need anything, if we need to pray for you, encourage you as you go through this next season that God has for you, your home is always open to you, and we'd love to journey with you. But I want you to hear me say, great job. We are proud of you. One more time, can we give it a hand for all the seniors that are graduating? Absolutely. Absolutely. We are in a great series. It's called My Freedom. And I was actually just recently, I was walking into the worship center. I was talking to a gentleman, and we were making some general conversation. The niceties of, and the weather nice and yada, yada, all the different stuff. We were walking this way in the back of the worship center, and he stopped. And when somebody changes like their tone and the whole thing of conversation, like something's getting ready to happen. And the question is it good or is it bad, right? Well, this guy put his hand on my shoulder, and here's what he said. He said, David, I just want to pause for just a second, and I want to say thank you. Thank you for listening and doing this series. He goes, I was honestly not excited about this series. I really wasn't thinking much about it, but he goes, within the first week, after that first message, and throughout all these different groups, he goes, Dave, I'm a changed man. He goes, what God is doing inside of my life right now, I am forever grateful. So thank you for saying yes to this series. And that kind of stuff is happening all across this campus with you guys. It's absolutely incredible to hear and to see how God is moving in your life. Would y'all be okay if I read you a couple stories? Y'all want to hear a couple stories of what's happening in the chairs and the lives? Yeah, okay. Let me give you just a few of them. I literally, in my office, have a stack of over 100 of these. Honestly, I just grabbed a few of them just to kind of give you a taste of kind of what's going on, what's happening in the lives. Here's a couple of them for you. This is one of the ladies that is going through it, and she simply had this to say about it. She said, I've enjoyed having a daily time with God. It has helped me to slow down and prioritize my time with God daily. See, I love that because when we prioritize our time with God, man, he comes alive in our life in a way that wasn't previously felt, and that's exactly what she's feeling. I love that. Here, listen to this one. This one's really cool. This is the first time in my life that I have dove into the Bible. Now, I am a forever Christian, as he puts it. But all I've done is hear Bible stories and whatever I've heard at church. I have not read the Bible. So I'm a forever Christian, but I have not read the Bible. I love this. Listen to this. He goes, I even have multiple Bibles. But because of this freedom series, because of these freedom groups, he goes, I am now diving in for this first time, and I plan to continue. Amen? Come on, that's a good one right there. I love that. Here, listen to this one. This one just spoke out to me. It's very simple. You see how small it is, but this is the big deal of what it is. It says, I feel freed. And listen to this word. I feel freed from decades. That's years with a zero on the end, in case you were wondering. I feel freed from decades of old mistakes and old traumas. What? For the first time in decades, she's feeling freedom in certain areas of her life? Come on. Listen to this one. This one was cool. This is a gentleman that's going through it. He says, though I am in the storm is not in me. I am more resilient now more than ever. Listen to this. This has been a group that I tried to make excuses of why it wouldn't work. Now, I make reasons why other things cannot get in the way of this group. Love that, man. Keep going after it. Listen to this. This is a lady or a guy who describes it this way. He says, I felt like there was something missing in my life. How many of you guys have ever felt that before? Just something is missing in my life. It's not going right. I got something going on. His first Sunday was Easter, and he saw us talking about the freedom groups. And so he registered for the event. He wanted to come to the freedom groups. He got off of work that day. He pulls into our parking lot. He gets out of his car, and the way that he describes it, he says, I got into my head. My thoughts started raining, and he goes, I got all the way to the front door, and I said, nope, I can't do this. And then an angel opened the door and said, hey, are you here for freedom? And then he describes this. He says, only God could have sat me at a table with a group of guys that were dealing with the same things that I personally am dealing with. And I'm proud to say that I'm experiencing freedom at a level that I've never had before. That's what's happening. Y'all good for one more? This one's incredible. I'm just going to summarize this one as well. This one is a lady who... She says, God allowed me to be aware of something. This wasn't in the freedom groups, but this was done in a devotion, the devotions that we're doing in the middle of the week. And she said, God revealed something to me. For the first time, I'm realizing it's been months that I have felt the thoughts of suicide. Months. Y'all, for the first time, she's realizing, can you imagine going through life and now for the first time in months, you can replace the thoughts of wanting to kill yourself. And now she's filling it with the thoughts of God. She's filling it with this freedom that God wants. That's what's happening in your life. Can you give a hand for everybody that is just going through this? God, we just thank you for the freedom that we're experiencing as a church, and I absolutely love it. That's a few stories. I wish I could sit here for, honestly, hours and just tell you story after story of what's going on. Now, you may be here for the first time going, man, I kind of feel like I'm behind the eight ball. We're ending the series, and I'm hearing all these stories. Listen, every single one of these weekends are really a standalone, and it's done on purpose that way for you guys. But whether this is your first message in the series or you've gone through the whole thing, I encourage you, go back, listen to our podcast, get on YouTube. The way that I describe it is when we take groups over to Israel, that first week, the first time that you go over to Israel, it's like a fire hose. There's just too much information. There's too many experiences of what God is doing in your life. It just feels overwhelming. It's not until the second or third time that you go over there that you can begin to slow down and experience different levels of the trip. You'll go to certain areas and go, man, I remember going here. I just don't remember this part of the journey. Well, it's because the fire hose is getting a little bit more manageable, right? That's what's happening with this freedom group, and I encourage you, go back because God's going to meet you exactly in the season that you're in and show you different levels of freedom that you can obtain in your life. So check it out on YouTube, get on our podcast. But in about 30 seconds, I'm going to recap what we've been doing over the last 6 weeks. The first week is we took a look at creation. We took a look at the original design of what God intended on this earth. How many of you guys have been to a mall, you've been to an outlet mall, and you're trying to figure out where you're going? And so you go to the map in the middle of this place, and what is the first thing you look for on that map? You got to look for the little red X that says you are here, because until you know where you are, you can't know where you're going. Well, that's the intention of it. We got to understand how God originally designed this earth, the whole creation. And in the second week, we realized that there's this choice that we have to make. In the garden, there was these two trees, and what it ends up being is a way of how are we going to approach God? Are we going to approach him through the tree of knowledge of good and evil, meaning this is all this head knowledge that we have, or are we ever going to let the relationship dip down into our heart and we operate out of the tree of life? We have this choice of how are we going to do life. Eddie brought a phenomenal message on week number 3 talking about why did Jesus come, when we had this realization that God was on and is still on a rescue mission for you and I. He came to save this world, to turn it upside down, to be counterculture, and to be our Savior. Week number 4, we kind of took a look at identity, and the big overarching idea there, the concept that I hope that you walked away with was this, is that this discovering our identity process isn't an event, it's a journey. And as we discover and we read our scriptures, as we dive into the Bible, we get to experience what God says about you and I, and that's our true identity. It's not the things that have been labeled on us throughout our entire life. This is the part of the process where we started hearing about our story. We heard God's story in the first 3. We're shifting to what our story is in this whole thing. Last week, Pastor Meg and Pastor Luke brought a great message around heart blockages. And we really kind of identified, hey, we're saved, right? But we got a lot of junk in our life still. And we kind of labeled it down to the 5 top areas that are hitting people in today's society. And it's been just a great week, and the groups that we had this past weekend were pretty incredible, of people going through those heart blockages. For some of you, you said, man, week number 5 was kind of tough, right? Because we're hitting into those things because God never meant for us to be saved, but yet to live a miserable life. He wants us to experience freedom with the life that we have here on earth. And here we are at week number 6, our final weekend, and we're going to look at the very important principle of following Jesus. And we really want what, at the end of the day, this momentum that we feel like God has in our life, we want it to continue. This isn't an event. This isn't a one-time thing. This will end, but yet how do we have this continue to happen in our lives? And the thing that I really want to do before we dive into it is I do want to celebrate you guys, because what you're experiencing in your life right now with God, with Christ, is you're living out a biblical principle in my favorite verse, which is found in James chapter 4, verse 8, that says this, that when you draw close to God, God draws close to you and I, and we're experiencing what that feels like. And you say, well, Dave, did God go somewhere, or did he just magically reappear? No. What's happening is our God consciousness is now growing. God is always there, but yet we took that step, and he goes, whew, I'm here, let's go. And it's amazing that when we draw close to God, it's this experience of discovering what it feels like when he draws close to us. Well, how did we do that? Well, you guys have been engaging in incredible levels. You've been giving Jesus 5 extra nights of your week. For 5 nights, you've been diving into the Holy Spirit with these devotions and making these devotions come alive in your life and answering these questions. One night of the week, you come together, and not only are you experiencing James chapter 4, verse 8, but you're also experiencing a principle in the next chapter, because in James chapter 5, we all have things that we need to receive forgiveness from, right? Where do we receive this forgiveness from? There's only one source that forgiveness comes from. It's God. It's Jesus, because of what he did on the cross for you and I. But however, when we're engaging in these groups like over 500 of you guys have been doing, you tap into this next principle, of which forgiveness comes from God, but the confession of one to another creates healing in our life. There was another story that I was reading this past weekend, and here's how she sums that up. She simply just says this. She says, I feel freed from the trauma I've been carrying around my whole life. I was able to open up about things that I have never openly shared. You see, that's the power of when we put the Bible to practice in our life, we receive that kind of freedom. Our God consciousness over the past 6 weeks has been growing tremendously. And to put this in a common term, you know, if you bought a brand new midnight blue truck, you're like, man, I got a one-of-a-kind. There's not many of them out there in the low country. Until you buy it, you don't ever realize how many midnight blue trucks are out on the roads. Why is that? Well, now you're conscious to the car that you bought, and now you begin to see them everywhere. It's the same thing that's happening in our life right now, which is the level of our God consciousness is growing. And we're beginning to see him in our life. We're beginning to see him in our relationship. We're beginning to see him in the areas that we previously struggled in, and replacing that struggle with him. Our God consciousness is growing, which, by the way, is the original design of what God meant for the church. You see, when Jesus left this earth, before he went back up into heaven, he gave us the gift of the church, and we see the disciples engaging in this church activity. Listen to how they describe the true intentions. This is Acts chapter 2. It says, every day they continued to meet together in the church. Or a church, or a Bible term, they met in the temple. That was their church. Every day they continued to meet in the church. They broke bread in their homes, and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all. How many of you guys have enjoyed sitting around a table and meeting new people that you've never known before? I actually heard a guy said, Dave, I've been praying for friends for, I can't honestly tell you how long. And he goes, the biggest thing that I've gotten from this freedom group is I have a group of guys that I'm doing life with for the first time. You're seeing this happen, but watch this last line. It says, and the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. That reminds me of another story that I read, and I just want to give it to you because it's such an incredible thing. And I love this because when you think about this process of how people are being added to the church daily, y'all, there's been over 100 people who have received salvations just in this series. That's incredible. This lady right here, here's how she puts it. She goes, Dave, I lost a bet to someone at work. Had to come to church. Which, by the way, whoever was the person who the result of the bet was that not that you got money or that you got a prize, that you told them, hey, if you lose, you got to come to church with me. I mean, kudos to you that that's the prize, man. Come on. I love that. I'm proud of that right there. So she lost a bet, and she had to come to church. So their first Sunday was Easter. Here's what she says. She says, when I started freedom groups, I was pagan and looking for answers. After a few sessions, y'all listen, after a few sessions and a few Sunday services, I was saved. I've since been diving deep into this whole freedom process and in Christianity, and I want you to listen to how she describes what freedom is. She says, for my entire life, I have felt like I was on one side of the door and God was on the other side of a locked door. I couldn't get access to him. And she says, freedom was the physical key that unlocked the door between me and Jesus. Isn't that incredible? I got a chance to actually meet. I had no idea she was in the service, but I got a chance to meet her last service. And can I just tell you how excited she is for everything that God's doing in her life? Come on. So here's what I want to do today. What I want to do today is I want to end this series by talking about a principle that will add unbelievable value to your life. Now, what I don't want you to hear me say is I'm getting ready to give you the magic pill that's going to solve all the problems in your life. That is not the case. But if, but if you put this into play in your life, you're going to see unbelievable value. The way that I would say it is that if you catch this, all I'm going to tell you is just you better watch out. In fact, here's the way that I've been thinking about this service is, yes, I'm up here preaching this service to you guys, but I'm sitting in the chairs with you this weekend because I need this reminder. I need to constantly remind myself of this principle because when I am good at implementing it into my life, it's unreal how effective it is. How many of you guys have ever had a busy week and there's a difference between you have a busy week, same struggles, same things that you got to deal with, but one of those ends in still having a lot of energy, having life, being excited about what you've accomplished, whereas the same kind of thing going on, but you end with just being drained and just you're not excited, you don't look forward to waking up every single day. There's a reason why that happens. The thing that I want to talk to you today about is this. I want to talk to you about the power of the Sabbath. Everybody say Sabbath. Sabbath. The most simple English word I can give you is rest. Everybody say rest. That's what I want to talk to you about today because the way that I view this and when I've been thinking and praying about you guys of, God, where do you have, I want to make sure I understand, God, where you have us as individuals, where you have us as a church. And when I think and pray over you guys, I get this picture that we're at a beach and there's a line in the sand. And we have this decision, every single one of us, to make, which is this, is are we going to go back to the old habits that we know of as life, or are we going to cross this line and move forward into the freedom that God has for us? That's the decision that we have to make. Now, some of you guys heard when I said Sabbath or rest, you're like, oh man, I'm so glad I came this Sunday because this is going to validate every reason why I've been wanting to take this vacation, right? That's not what I'm talking about, because I've heard the stories of some of y'all's vacations, and when y'all come back from vacation, you need a vacation from your vacation. Like, you're exhausted, right? What I'm talking about today is true rest. Big difference there. And this is a play that Jesus ran time and time again. We see this habit that he did over and over in good times and bad times. It was just a regular thing that we see Jesus live out all throughout the New Testament. And I'm willing to say it's one of the more important principles that Jesus not only shows us and talks to us about, but we see how he lived it out. So the question is this, is how do we master this understanding of taking a Sabbath in our life? I was talking to one of our staff members, and we were talking about these habits that we see Jesus do in the Bible, and I just asked her because I was curious. I said, hey, what habit do you see me doing around here? She goes, well, Dave, I can tell you that easily. Answer me without a shadow of a doubt. She said, Dave, it doesn't matter what month we're in, I can guarantee you're going to be whistling Christmas. 100% right, 100%. If a month has an alphabetical letter, that's a great day to celebrate Christmas. Why not? Right now, I'm whistling Jingle Bells the whole month long, so you're just going to be getting it. And even my kids, they know I'm going to be whistling some Christmas songs around here. Here's what James Clear says in his book, and if you've never read this, it's a phenomenal book. It's called Atomic Habits. I encourage you to read it, but here's what he says. He says, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. You fall to the level of your habits. And what we see in Scripture here is Jesus fell to the level of this habit, this structure that was operating in his life. Honestly, it's what made him able to accomplish his goal so well. Yes, he was fully God, but he was also fully human and susceptible to the same things that me and you struggle with. We see this thing operating in his life, and in my opinion, it makes him, not only was he, but he is the greatest example for you and I to follow. Now, this Sabbath thing that I'm talking about is not just a New Testament Jesus thing that we see. We see the Sabbath thing really starts all the way back into the Old Testament. It even goes before the Ten Commandments. And yes, it did make the top 10 list. And if you're intrigued, it's number 4 on the list. I found this personally intriguing. Of all the 10 commandments, when you put them together, this commandment that he gives us makes up 30% of the list, okay? So obviously there's some weight behind it, but this commandment that we find in the 10 commandments does stand out from the rest, and here's why. Because it's the only commandment that he takes the time to explain. Let me explain this. In the 10 commandments, when he says, hey, thou shalt not steal, what we don't see afterwards is, hey, here's what I mean by stealing, and here's the consequences in your life if you do it. No, it just simply says, thou shalt not steal. When he tells us, hey, thou shalt not commit adultery, he doesn't give us a clear, okay, here's that line. When you cross it, it's now adultery. No. He says, thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not kill. This is the only one, this whole Sabbath principle, that he takes the time to explain. And let me show it to you in Exodus chapter 20, verse 8. Here's where it talks about it. It says, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, meaning that this is a very special day. This is a day that's set apart. And then he goes into it. 6 days shall you labor and do all of your work. For 6 days, answer all your emails, do all the things that you need to do. But on the 7th day, it is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. And on it, you shall not do any work. And then he lists a whole bunch of other people because he knows that we were going to try to do some workaround system that where we weren't working, but yet we got some other people to do it for us, right? So look at the list. Neither you, nor your sons, your daughters, nor your male or your female servants, nor your animals. I'm not sure how you've trained your animals to do your emails, but even them are in here. nor any of the foreigners residing in your town. You can't even find somebody on the streets and say, like, listen, I know you're not doing the Sabbath, but can you do some work for me? No, like, you can't find even, like, strangers. And then he validates, he says, for in 6 days, the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that was in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed, underline or highlight that word blessed, because we're going to talk about that later. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. You see, God was seeing something. He was seeing something important for himself to do. When God sent his son Jesus onto the earth, we see this habit that Jesus took and observed the Sabbath. It's everywhere. And what I think is this, is that if God needs a Sabbath, if Jesus needs a Sabbath, guess what? You and I need a... All right, y'all got it. 6 days. Do everything that you need to do. 6 days are yours, but on one day, you stop. We rest. Now, here's what's interesting is a few chapters later, 11 chapters, we just read in chapter 20. We're in the same book of the Bible. This is the second book in the Bible called Exodus. We were in chapter 20. Go 11 chapters later. He's talking about the Sabbath again to Moses. But we see a language change. Now, God's a God who never changes, so maybe a better way to say that would be that he added some now new vocabulary to it, okay? But we see that in chapter 20, he told us to remember the Sabbath. Now, in chapter 31, we see that he says, I need you to observe the Sabbath. There's a difference between the two. You see, we observe a bunch of different holidays. The next one that we have coming up is what? Memorial Day, where we are going to observe and honor the men and women who have died and gone before us for us to live in the freedom and the amazing country that we get to live in, right? So we're going to observe Memorial Day, okay? And we do this with a bunch of different holidays. We do this with Christmas, with Easter, with July 4th, Thanksgiving, and the list goes on and on. But what do we do when we observe these days? We plan, we prepare, we make our best foods, we get around some of our favorite people that we want to be around. That day is exciting, and we look forward to these days that we observe. Keith Brace, who is a member of the house, he is in the military. He does a lot of stuff with us to help us acknowledge that day, and I love how he has always helped us in how to observe Memorial Day. He says, you don't sit in your home. No, get out and experience this great country. That's the reason why they died, for us to be able to go out and not only experience it, but appreciate the freedoms that we get to go out and get the grill out and be with our friends and our family. That's how you honor and you observe this day. And I think what I like about that is God is saying, hey, I need you to observe the Sabbath. I want you to make plans for this day. Don't skip them. Don't let them happen by accident. I want you to get excited for this day. God is saying, I need you to make plans for this day of rest where you can live out the literal definition of the word Sabbath, which simply means to cease from work. That's the literal definition of Sabbath, ceasing from work, where we stop working and we intentionally rest. We fill ourselves back up. Our souls get replenished. Now, this is a very tough concept for us and for people in this world, because we live in a world that does not value anything else but going. Our world values never stopping. Our world values doing and producing. We have no use, and it's hard to see a gift that invites us to stop. Can you begin to see how counterculture this is for us in our society? The Sabbath is a gift that we don't naturally know how to receive. And as I was preparing for this in my office this past week, that began to be my prayer for y'all and for myself. God, would you not only reveal to us what this Sabbath truly means, but would you create inside of every one of us a value system that we want to make sure that this principle is operating in my life. And so what I want to do is go through that journey. How do we do this? What fills our souls on the inside? Well, for the majority of us, you guys are actually participating in it right now. For the majority of people in our society today, that Sabbath is on a Sunday, okay? And what do? We go to church. And we're a society that loves food, and so we go get some good food afterwards, right? We get around some good friends. You're relaxing. Maybe you're like a lot of people in the low country that like to go on the water, so you go to the beach or you get on the boat, or some of the couples in our neighborhood, I see that they're doing golfing for the 8 hours that it takes to go golfing, right? Whatever it is, you got some stuff. And I love this because the Bible begins to paint a picture of what the Sabbath is. The Bible paints this picture that our Sabbath is not a noun, it's a verb. And we don't just sit around our house on the Sabbath, quiet, eyes closed, with a sign around our neck that says, do not disturb. No, that's weird. We don't do that. But I love this picture because it's one of stopping. It's resting from the work side of life, and you're saying, I'm delighting in the goodness of God. How many of you guys are thankful for the goodness of God in your life? Like, God, I'm thankful for what you're doing in my life. I'm thankful for my family. I'm thankful for my church. I'm thankful for the freedom that you're receiving and putting into my life. I'm stopping, pausing, and saying, God, I'm thankful for the goodness in my life. You see, we've all heard of stories of people being unbelievably driven. Now, this is not a knock on driven, because you're not going to meet there's only a few people that I would be willing to say that are more driven than I am. We do an extensive, it's not a personality test, but for our staff members, we do this, we want to understand who you are and make sure your gifts are coming alive. And so there's about an 8-hour test that we take them through. It's called the Highlands test. It's a great test. You can't confuse it. You can't cheat it. You know how like personality tests, like I really want to be this personality, so you like mix the answers. You can't do that with this test. And on this test, they rank it. One of the things that they rank is drive. I have a 99 out of 100 drive. It's the highest in our entire staff. Okay, so hear me say that this is not a knock. I love being driven, and I think it's a gift from God that he gives us. But how many of you guys know that we can always abuse those gifts? Okay? We've all heard of stories of people being so driven, never stopping, and they have this belief system that the only way that I can succeed is if I don't stop. I've got to work 7 days a week, because the moment that I stop, somebody else is going to get ahead of me. And what ends up happening is they end in this crash and burn kind of a state. This exhaustion ends up setting in, whatever, and you unfortunately hear these stories where people are having heart attacks in their 20s and 30s, and it's happening way too young. What happens in those moments? What happens is that we misplace these desires. When we misplace these desires that God puts on the inside of every human being. We're made by God, for God, and we're only completely satisfied when we have God in the right place in our lives. But when we replace that desire with whatever level of success and wealth and power and fame, whatever it is for you, and we remove the resting in God component in our life, it leads to destruction. It leads to burnout. It leads to depression, so on and so forth. And God is saying, hey, listen, I want you to work 6 days, but I need you to take one where you stop, where you rest, where your desires are awakened, where we can be realigned with what God is doing in our life. This is a day where our focus begins to shift back to him. My mind is not on my email. My mind is not on my social media. My mind is not on any kind of work activity. My mind is on God, what do you have for me this week? My goals are your goals. Am I doing your goals, or has my agenda now replaced it? God, I want to carry out the plan that you have for my life. How can I better accomplish that? Lord, would you refresh the vision that you have for my life? God, how's my character? How's my attitude? What kind of father am I being? You get this picture of, I'm diving into this. Now, as a part of this process, I was trying really hard to find an example that would really make sense to us. I came across this pastor, and he described the Sabbath in this way, and it really resonated with me, and I hope the same will happen to you. But there's a particular day in our year that every one of us engage with where we actually engage in a true Sabbath. You ready for this? The day that we do the Sabbath the best is Christmas. Christmas. Now, I want you to think about this, okay? Now, we're going to take the toys and the gifts and all those batteries because those are straight from the enemy, okay? Hate those things, right? But remove that concept, and I want you to think about that day. The day is getting close, and what are you doing? You're planning, you're preparing, you're getting excited. The anticipation is building on the inside, right? Even the night before Christmas, you're so excited to wake up, and you just don't even know what to do. You're so excited for this whole thing, and the day finally comes. You wake up on Christmas Day, and you have all of Sam's and Costco in your refrigerator. And you begin to make breakfast that is sent straight from heaven. I mean, you got the bacon, the sausage, the biscuits and gravy, the breakfast casserole. That's not, any of them are going to put a centimeter on your waistline. So that's what happens on Christmas Day. You're not in a rush to go anywhere. You're not stressed. You're excited to spend time with your family. You're excited to spend time with your friends. You're even calling loved ones. And then sometimes the Lord blesses you with an amazing nap. Can I get an amen? And you wake up from that nap and there's a basketball game. Oh, sorry, that's me. That's my Christmas Day. That's my joy, right? But Christmas Day is a day where we tap more into the biblical Sabbath than any other time period of the year. I'm excited about that day. I'm not stressed. I'm not rushed. We planned. We know what it looks. It's a beautiful day, which, by the way, to the best of my ability, this, not perfection, but to the best of my ability, this is what Macy and I's Sabbath looks like. In fact, you can ask any of our closest friends. Macy and I's Sabbath is a Friday, okay? It's not today because why? I am working right now, okay? So therefore, I can't cease to work on this day, right? So the day that we observe our Sabbath is a Friday. We look forward to this day. We talk about this day throughout the week. We plan and prepare for this Friday. It's a Friday, so we drop our kids off at school, and amen, right? And then for me and Macy, Baylor, I love you so much, by the way. No, but seriously, we get excited because one of the things that puts into Macy, everybody has different things that puts into them. But for Macy and I, it's the water. We're going to drop our kids off, and then we're going to go onto the boat. Right? We're going to enjoy our time out there. We're going to talk about our week. How are we doing in our week? I want to get around my friends and my family, and so we're going to invite them to come onto the boat or whatever it is that we're doing. Either Macy and I or one of our friends will go pick up our kids from school because we want to enjoy our time with the kids in one of their favorite areas as well, which is being out on the water. We're purposeful about our day. Our friends know we take our Fridays serious. It's important. In fact, this is what Mark chapter 2, verse 27 says about it. It says, the Sabbath was made for the sake of the people and not people for the Sabbath. Okay, the Sabbath was not created for you to serve the Sabbath. The Sabbath was created for the Sabbath to serve you. He's understanding that God is telling us something. He's saying, listen, I know you. I know your needs. And he's saying, listen, I think I have some credibility because don't forget, I created you. I think I can speak into this topic, right? And he's trying to show us, hey, here's how to structure your life, because if you continually put your desires on these other things, they will destroy you eventually. Take the Sabbath once a week, where we get away from the work side of our life and we rest. We worship God. We eat some of our best meals. We're around our friends. We go to the beach. We get on the boat. We go on the golf course, whatever it is. But what you're noticing is God has this rhythm of life that he's trying to teach you and I. Here's the trouble. The trouble is that for 90-something% of people in the world, and I could bore you, I love geeking out on this stuff. I can show you study after study that this is the case and this is the reality. But for 90% of the people, you describe your life as restlessness and not restfulness. Recently, Macy and I, there's a pastor that has been a mentor of mine from afar. I didn't have that relationship, but God gave us the grace to spend a few days with him personally a couple weeks ago. And there was a couple other couples with us, and this pastor asked this question. He said, I need some help in a particular area. He goes, I'm burned out, I'm tired. What do you do to refresh yourself? This mentor pastor of mine responded with this story. He said, I mentor this other guy, and he called with a similar thing. And he said, listen, I have one question. I'm burned out. I'm done. I know I don't need to be done, but I just feel like I'm done. He goes, can you give me the name of a counselor? Because I need to get some things off my chest. I need to figure this whole thing out. Can you give me the name of a counselor? And after talking about it a little bit, he goes, hey, can I take a crack at it? And he goes, yeah, I mean, sure. You're one of my mentors. Go for it. And he asked this question. He goes, when's the last time you took a Sabbath? And he was actually shocked that he had to describe what the Sabbath really was to a pastor. Okay? And he realized this guy is not operating in this principle. This is not a commandment that he's abiding by. Okay? And he ended with this. He said this statement, which spoke volumes to me. He says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to spend the next 6 weeks doing what we just talked about. I want you to actually observe the Sabbath in your life. And at the end of the 6 weeks, I want you to call me. And if you do not experience a different and God doesn't do a major work in your life, I'll not only give you the name of a counselor, but I will pay for the counselor. Guess what happened on week number 6? Brother calls back and goes, dude, you're never going to guess what happened. Dude, I feel great. I'm charged up. I'm ready to go. I can already feel a major difference. And the guy looks at me and goes, well, duh. You're doing what God tells you to do, right? See, what this guy was experiencing, this pastor was experiencing, is the opposite of what Jesus desires for my life and your life. And he actually talks about this in Matthew chapter 11 because he lists, you don't have to raise your hand for this, but answer this internally of this question of how many of you guys are just tired? How many of you guys are just exhausted in the wheel of life, and it just is so much harder than it really needs to be? This is the question that Jesus is posing. He's saying, hey, are you tired? Come to me, all who are weary. Come to me, all who are burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest. Man, I think some of you guys need some rest, true rest. And he ends on this line that we love to put on our Facebooks and on our refrigerators. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. I wonder if we actually understand what that means. You see, this yoke that he was talking about was made for oxen. It was an agricultural term. And if he wouldn't have put a yoke as a farmer onto the ox would just go anywhere and everything all over the field, have no purpose and no straight path for what they were trying to accomplish. But the yoke would be the structure that the farmer would put on the ox to accomplish what needed to happen. And what he's saying here is if you put on this yoke that Jesus has, he says, listen, I have a structure for your life that when you rest in me, I can do way more than you can by yourself. There's a structure within my yoke is easy. You see, the enemy would love nothing more than to deceive us and not understanding the power of the Sabbath. How does that look in your life, Dave? Okay, I understand that the enemy doesn't want to, but how about some of these words that may describe a life that is full of restlessness? It looks like busyness in our life. It looks like a life that's full of all the noise and distractions that life has to offer. It feels like we're always in this state of hurry, like I'm always behind the 8 ball. I always am running off to one thing after the next. I'm in this constant state of hurry, 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 hurry. It's this insatiable desire that we always feel like we need more. That leads to isolation. There's worry in our life. There's anxiety in our life. These words connect with all that. Listen to what A.J. Swoboda says in his incredible book called Subversive Sabbath. Listen to this statement. He says, we have become the most emotionally exhausted, psychologically overworked, spiritually malnourished people in history. Wow. Could this Sabbath principle be the thing that is missing in our society? Let's hit closer to home. Could the Sabbath principle that I'm trying my best to display to you, could it be the thing that's missing in your life? Would everybody agree with me on this statement that we don't obey the 10 Commandments to receive salvation, correct? Salvation comes from one place, from the belief that Jesus died on the cross, rose again, okay? That's it. But would you agree with me that when we obey the commandments, the 10 Commandments, that we live a blessed life because of it? There's blessings that come along with it, okay? Now, if that is true, if you agree with that statement, then the opposite is also true. And we don't think about this very often. But when we don't keep the commandments in our life, there's consequences. If thou shalt not steal. Now, you may be good enough the first time that you get away with it, right? But if you don't abide by this commandment, are there going to be consequences if you continually steal? Now, this sin does not have equal consequences, because if I steal something really big, I'm going to jail for a lot longer. Okay? It's not all created equal in that world. If you commit adultery, I don't think I have to convince you of the damaging effects it's going to have on your marriage. Okay, there's consequences. All of these things that I just listed as a restless life are these self-inflicted, and people always try to put a blame on God of why is this always happening in my life, not realizing they're not even abiding by the principles that are found in the Bible. But it's these self-inflicted consequences of not keeping this commandment. Are you beginning to see how God is trying his best for us to see how to live a blessed life? Like when we live in the structure of the Sabbath, when we put this yoke that Jesus has for you and I, here's what a life sounds like when we do that. This life that we described earlier as restfulness. Looks like you got peace in your life. Joy. Love. Contentment. It feels like you have margin. Man, how many of you guys would like some margin in your life? How many of you guys would love to have some deep friendships, some deep relationships, that the trust factor is high, that there's something about it that defines you as there's a slowness to you. It doesn't mean that you're not accomplishing a lot. But how many of you guys know that you can be a really busy person accomplishing a lot for God, but yet you're not exhausted? Those two worlds can't exist, and God's trying to show us that. There's clarity, there's kindness, and the list goes on. Are you beginning to see the value of the Sabbath in our life? Yeah? Just wave at me. Anybody? No? Okay, this section still is on point, okay? We're speaking to you, okay. So I think some of us needed a reminder today that says this: I'm breaking the cycle. I will pick work back up tomorrow, but today I'm picking Jesus. Today, I'm picking rest. Today, I'm picking family, friends, good food, and the list goes on. And I'm excited for you and I because we're stepping into this new season. This last 6 weeks has been incredible of what God has been doing. God is doing the incredible in your life. Our God conscious is growing, and what's happening is now he's taken us through this whole entire process. He's been making the ice cream sundae all week long, all 6 weeks long, and now with the Sabbath principle, it's like he's sprinkling the sprinkles on the top of the ice cream sundae. Y'all don't like ice cream as much as I do, obviously. Hey, let me give it to you in this way. How many of you guys have ever seen a river? And on the side of a river, what do you see? Trees, bushes, vegetation. That's there for a reason. Ecologists actually call this the riparian buffer, okay? And it's there for a reason because it's capturing all the nutrients that are coming down, but it's also preventing the erosion that is happening on those banks. The same thing is true in our life, because what would happen is when it was an agrarian culture, what they would do is they would clear this riparian buffer and they would plant their crops in this zone for one particular reason. They got the benefits of all those nutrients coming down. They got the benefits of the moisture of all the water that comes from the river, and they didn't have to do the work themselves. Okay? The Sabbath is the riparian buffer in our life. For too many of you guys, and I talked to so many of you guys, your day off has been the hardest day of your week. And there's a lot of different reasons that I'm not going to go into. But I want God to reshape our minds about this day. God, would you reshape our minds that this is the best day of our week? That this is the day where I rest the most. This is a day that I feel more filled up than any other day. This is a day where I play the most, a day where I eat the best meals that I have, a day where, God, I will observe you on this day. I'm making plans, and we leave this day filled up. We leave this day feeling closer to God, fired up for the next 6 days that he has for us. This is a day that God says is holy. Now, does that mean other days are not holy? No, because everything under God's sun is that. However, in Scripture that I read in the 10 Commandments, he says that this day is something more special than the other 6 days. This day is blessed by God himself. You see, we're not just taking a day off. A trip to the Bahamas is not going to fix this thing. It's going to be nice. Love to go to Bahamas, right? But when you take a Sabbath, God says, I will bless that day. You saw Misty up here leading us into receiving our tithes and offering, right? It's the same process, because what we're saying is, God, I trust you with my finances over myself. God can do more with the 90% than we can with the 100%. And the same thing with our days. God is saying, I can do more in 6 days than you can do with 7 on your own. That's this principle. In 1519, and I'm closing now. In 1519, during the Spanish conquest of Mexico, there's a guy named Hernan Cortez. You may have remembered him in your high school days, right? He ordered his men to do something really unique, something that had never been done before. You see, they were approaching the shoreline, and as they got to the shoreline, Hernan Cortez looked at his men and said, the last step that I want you to take before you go onto the shore is I want you to burn your ship. What? Why in the world would you burn your ships? He understood something. Because in order, he wanted to send a very clear message to his men. And he did this in order to do this, that there is no option other than victory. He's taken the option of going back. He knew that as long as those ships remained in the harbor, that there would be the temptation for his men that when things got hard, that when things didn't look like they were going to come out in victory, that where's the first place that they would retreat to? Right back to those ships. Victory is the only option. He had to destroy the idea of a backup plan. You see, this is the call that Jesus gives every single one of us who follow him. To go all in and burn those ships so that there is no way back. And I just think now more than ever, with every distraction that we have at our fingertips, that we've got to stay steadfast in this vision that God gives each and every single one of us for our lives. Because when there's nowhere behind us to go, there's only one direction that we can go, and that's forward. That's going after the things that God has for us. So we dedicate, we commit ourselves to God and to his way, to God's structure for our life. We seek his will. Because when we do, when we burn the ships, remember the beginning of the service where I said there's a line in the sand for us? Are we going to burn the ships of the old way of doing life and go back to it? Or are we going to burn those ships and make it to where there's no other option other than the freedom that God offers you and I? Isaiah chapter 40 says this, but for those who wait upon God, for those who rest in God, for those who honor the principle of Sabbath in your life, God has something for us. But for those of you who wait upon the Lord, God, you are going to get fresh strength. How many guys would love some fresh strength right now? God, I'm tired of doing this on my own. I want your strength in my life. And when he does that, you will spread your wings and soar like eagles. You will run and not get tired. You will walk and not get left behind. Here's how we're going to end today's service. There's a sense that I just really wanted to impart something to you with the Sabbath, but I also want to seal what God is doing. This is a special time period in this church. This is a special time period in your life. And the way that we're going to do that is communion. So I've asked the team, y'all can go ahead and come on down and go ahead and start serving the people. We're going to do a quick little song, but here's what I want you to do as they're passing out communion. I don't want this to be just a time period where you just sit there and think about nothing as the plate comes by. What I want you to do is I want you to ask the Holy Spirit, Holy Spirit, how would I grow in my understanding with the Sabbath? Where am I? Have a conversation with him. Hold on to your elements as we do this worship song, and I'll come back and close. If you can, go ahead and take the bread, what represents the bread. and your hands. And I want us to take this in just a moment, but I want to tell you what this signifies, because the bread of communion signifies the body of Jesus. The body of Jesus was broken for us, nailed to a cross. And what he did was he took all of our sin, he took all of our shame, he took all of our grief, he took all of our disease, he took everything with him to the cross. And as I was thinking about this moment, I feel like the Lord gave me this picture of those burn the ships. And as we take this communion, we're going to break it on the count of 3. But when we do, as I count to 3, I want you to picture those ships being burned. That whatever it is that's been holding you back, whatever is the part of that old life that you want to make sure doesn't creep into this new life that God has. I just want you to get this imagery of you taking a stick that has fire in it and just burning those ships. 1, 2, 3. Take and eat. This wine represents his blood. And this was shed for a particular reason. What it represents is this covenant that he has with you and I, this new covenant. And yes, it brought with us the forgiveness of sins, but it also says that you and I are set apart as holy. Remember at the beginning of service when I said this day was what? Set apart. It was holy. And God never asked for perfection in our life. But what he does ask is for us to go after a relationship with him. And so I want this to represent, you don't have to understand everything about the Sabbath other than the fact of, God, I'm stopping. I want to honor what your word says, which says, I will work for 6. For most people, that's a 40-hour work week done in 5. You give 8 hours to yourself on a Saturday to do your taxes and lawn mowing and whatever else it is that you got to do. Work for yourself. But then there's this one day, God, I set it apart. I worship you. I'm thankful for you. I get around good friends. It's this covenant with him that is set apart. And may he bless you with a life that maybe you've never experienced contentment like this before in your life. Can I challenge you the same way that my pastor mentor challenged that other guy? Take a challenge for the next 6 weeks of your life. Press into the concept of the Sabbath, of truly resting, and see how God changes your life. Would you take and drink? Let me end with this charge. This comes out of Colossians chapter 3. It says, whatever you do, work with all of your heart as working for the Lord and not for human masters. What is it saying? Work with everything you got to the best of your abilities. For 6 days, I want you to give your best unto God. Whatever God has called you to, whatever assignment God has given you, do it with all of your heart. If you work for a company, whatever your role is, I want you to be the best employee. I want you to throw your heart into it. For all the entrepreneurs in the room, can I just tell you, we're with you. Kudos to you for stepping out in a major way of faith. Throw your heart into what God has called you to do. To all the leaders in the room, whether you're leading 1 or you're leading 100, I don't care. Throw your heart and soul into those people. 6 days shall you work. Whatever you do, work with all your heart. We're known for our work ethic. We're known for how diligent we are. We're known for the integrity of our business. We're known for the integrity of the people that we leave. And I love this verse out of Proverbs. Listen to what Proverbs says. It says, the soul of a lazy man desires and has nothing. But the soul of the diligent shall be made rich. 6 days, Cathedral, we give our best. And on the 7th day, we stop. We rest. We honor the Sabbath. We observe. On the seventh day, we refuse to accomplish, to strive, to achieve more. On this day, we worship, we thank God, we enjoy family, we enjoy friends, and what we're saying with the structure of our life, world, I don't need what you define as success. I don't need what you define as achievement. I did that for the last 6 days of my life. Now, on this day, I want what heaven's giving. You do this, and you're gonna watch things change in your life. You do this, and you're gonna watch the stress and anxiety in your life go down. You do this, and you're gonna see the God-sized dream and vision that He has for your life stay fresh. You do this, and you're gonna see a level of contentment and rest not previously felt in your life. You and I will be filled to overflowing with the goodness of God in our life. Amen? Stand to your feet. I want to bless you in the same way Israel celebrates the Sabbath in a very obvious way. They shut down the country, basically. You can't even get on elevators. You do no work. You cease from working. I want to end today the way the fathers of Israel pray over their families on the day of the Sabbath with you. It's a prayer that our founding pastor, Pastor Mike, did for years and years. Would you put your hands in front of you? May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord make His face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. Cathedral, I bless you with the ability that God has given you and I the structure and the power to break the cycle of exhaustion by resting in Him. So Cathedral, bless you with observing your Sabbath for the rest of your day. We love you guys so much.